Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar, where today we will be discussing the election ramifications for the clean energy workforce. We're so happy you're here, just giving everyone a chance to get in. Thank you for joining. Hello, Steve. Hello, David, Jason, Jordan. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hello, Karen, Franklin. I'm seeing some new names. That's so exciting. Hello, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar. Today, we will be discussing election ramifications for the clean energy workforce. Michelle, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. The Interstate Renewable Energy Council is a national nonprofit organization working to remove barriers to the deployment of clean energy for all Americans. We are dedicated to advancing the growth of a robust and diverse workforce in clean energy and energy efficiency fields. Our workforce development programs encompass registered apprenticeship programs, the Weatherization Assistance Program, solar energy, and credentialing for training providers, just to name a few. Outside of workforce development, IREC is engaged in state regulatory reform, as well as local initiatives, such as our Energy Ready program, which helps local governments accelerate solar energy, EV charging, and distributed wind. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is possible because of our funder, Bank of America. I am Janelle Hills-Thomas, Senior Director of Equitable Workforce Strategies here at IREC. Cynthia, Dr. Finley, is unable to be with us today, but we do have a great lineup of panelists. We have Aaron Duncan, who is the Vice President of Congressional Affairs at SEIA, Chris Nichols, who is the Executive Director at Renewables Forward, and we have Megan Evans, who is the Senior Government Affairs Manager at the National Skills Coalition. Just a few housekeeping rules. If you haven't done so already, please mute yourselves and introduce yourselves in the chat. We really want to know who's here, who's joining us for these conversations, because we have such a robust audience for the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance. Feel free to type your questions in the question answer option, and we will address all questions at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please, Michelle. Today's agenda includes a brief update on Alliance activities and what you can expect for the year, and then we'll move into our featured presentation with our panelists that I've already mentioned, and address your questions. I'm sure you have a lot, so we'll address those at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. If you're on this webinar, we know that you are likely to know good workforce development doesn't happen by accident. In order to rapidly scale a diverse and sustainable clean energy workforce, we will need to leverage best practices, resources, and strong partnerships. We continue to work to connect the dots and address clean energy workforce development more holistically, focusing on every aspect of the workforce development landscape, from new learner to worker recruitment and employer development and the retention of employees, which is very important. Next slide, please. Our strategic area focuses on funding and program design, recruitment and support of workers and learners, employer recruitment and retention, and training, education, and credentialing. Next slide, please. We're pretty excited about this platform. Green Workforce Connect is a platform led by IREC to help to connect job seekers, students, employers, and training providers so that we can provide and encourage the growth of a highly skilled and diverse workforce. Visit the website for opportunities for employment, training, and partnership. You're also encouraged to browse our extensive resources on topics including weatherization, registered apprenticeship programs, and solar energy. And I'm sure Avery will be dropping that in the link in the chat as I speak. In the news, we're also going to drop this in the link. You can go to the next slide, please, Michelle. You're welcome to join us on our LinkedIn page. A lot of exciting information and up-to-date information will be housed there. All you have to do is scan the QR code or visit the link you see on the screen. Next slide, please. A lot of you know that we typically hold the National Clean Energy webinar series on the third Thursday of every month. But this year, 2025, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to hold webinars every other month. And those possible topics include EV, solar for all, weatherization, utilities, unions, and AI and the future of the workforce. We will also be honing in and working in the Northeast region, the New England region, with some organizations to provide some hands-on attention and best practices and help them identify what those best practices are, talk about their challenges. So stay tuned for that work if you're in that region. And if you are in that region, feel free to send me an email and let me know that you want to be a part of those conversations. Next slide, please. And from here, I'll turn it over to Erin Decken. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. Whoops. There we go. Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. My name's Erin Duncan. I'm the Vice President of Congressional Affairs at the Solar Energy Industries Association. We are a proud partner with IREC and have an entire team working on solar workforce development issues and are very proud to be here today. Next slide. I wanted to start by laying some foundation. I know all of you know the basics of what we're facing in this new Congress with this new administration, but I think it bears repeating. The specifics really matter here, and how the politics play out around maintaining and preserving the portions of the Inflation Reduction Act that create the great jobs that we are all wanting to see in every community across the country really matters. And in particular, we have found that the messages around jobs and building economic stability and growth are very resonant on both sides of the aisle. So you are certainly, your roles in workforce development here are absolutely critical to our overall success. So the Republicans have kicked off this Congress with the narrowest majority in over 50 years. They will hold a 5-seat majority once all of the, most likely, once all the special elections are completed for those members of Congress who are departing for the new administration and or have resigned for new opportunities. Those seats will remain open likely until March, when all of the special elections can be completed in New York and Florida. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind as we watch them put into place detail work around the eventual budget reconciliation process. In the Senate, the margin of Republican control is a little bit bigger, but they still only hold 53 seats. You'll remember that in most cases outside of budget reconciliation, you need 60 votes in the Senate in order to proceed with the legislative process in order to pass cloture votes. So there's still a very big need, again, outside of budget reconciliation processes for there to be bipartisan work done in the United States Senate. So, and in that case, if there are any ties, the tie-breaking vote, of course, would be made by incoming Vice President Vance, much as current Vice President Harris cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act. So with the Republican trifecta in the House, Senate, and White House, they do have an opportunity to use the reconciliation process in order to accomplish their primary goal, which has been stated as being extending the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Reconciliation, as I note on the slide, is a parliamentary technique that allows legislation to pass with a simple majority in the US Senate, which is ordinarily very difficult to do. So those are the foundational issues that we're dealing with in this particular Congress. And as we've already seen, both in December with the passage of the continuing resolution that kept the government open just before the holidays, and on January 3rd, when it took 2 passes in order to gain enough votes for Speaker Johnson to become Speaker or remain Speaker. This very narrow margin is going to be a real challenge for House leadership and for the administration as they move forward with any legislative proposal. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a huge year for work in the Ways and Means Committee. And you'll recall that the way that the Inflation Reduction Act was passed was by using a reconciliation procedure when the Democrats had full control of the House, Senate, and administration. And it is fully expected that the Republicans will use this opportunity to extend the expiring tax cuts that will happen on December 31st, 2025, that originally passed in 2017. There is currently a big debate, which we don't need to get into here, around whether the full cost of extending those tax cuts will need to be paid for or offset. There is a pretty significant group of members of Congress in the House that are known as deficit hawks and want to see every bill paid for in full. And then there are others who view tax cuts in particular as economic stimulus, and therefore they create more economic benefit and do not need to be paid for. So that will be a debate that will happen between the House and the Senate, but it will really come down to what does Speaker Johnson need in order to pass, extend these tax cuts on the floor of the House. So why does the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act matter to all of us who care about clean energy jobs? For one thing, and most significantly, among the deficit hawks or folks that want to pay for extending these tax cuts, they look to big programs or pots of money in order to find offsets to pay for the extension of these tax cuts. And I don't need to remind any of you that the Inflation Reduction Act is a very large pot of funds and a place that can be looked to for pay-fors, as they call them on the Hill, for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So I think it's a little bit of a switch for us as we've spent so much time over the last 2 years looking at implementation of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the apprenticeship provisions and prevailing wage provisions and all of the great grants and opportunities that I know many of you have been implementing over the last 2 years, to look at it through the lens of it's a pay for, not as much as a proactive legislative process. So the main questions that Congress is still, and the administration, incoming administration, are trying to settle on will include, do they do one bill so that they address a host of issues that are important to Republican leaders at one time, which gives them more opportunities to wheel and deal and make compromises? Or do they do 2 bills? And what does that happen to the later bill, which is most likely the tax bill? What time frame are we talking about? We at SIA are operating, we're really taking House leadership at their word. They announced earlier this week that they plan to have the broad outline for the first part of the reconciliation process completed by the end of February. So we're activating and advocating with that timeframe in mind. Then they've also stated that they'd like to have reconciliation, the full package, completed by April or so of this year. So first part is the budget part, which they hope to have done by the end of February, and then March and April, kind of the making of the sausage, making of the legislation. And then, as my last question noted, where will they find the votes? They have a very narrow margin. I was reminded by one of my colleagues that the 2017 tax bill had, I believe, around 18 Republicans who voted no. And so even on the last reconciliation, full Republican majority, they lost 18 votes. And now their margin is even vastly slimmer. So one or two people can make all the difference, not to mention the absences that they'll have. Next slide. All right. So one of the ways that we have been looking at this, and I encourage all of you to take a look, is really to tell the story of how you have used these opportunities to create jobs and economic impact in your communities. These are some maps that we've created at SIA to think about where's the most impact been for the solar and storage industry, and where have we seen the biggest growth, and where do we think there are opportunities for us to leverage solar and storage employers, workforce, and others who have really compelling stories to tell about the opportunities that these investments have created in their communities. And so these are just the ones that we're operating out of. We encourage you to take a look at the stories in your own communities and make sure that you're prepared to explain those and tell those stories. Next slide. So the next piece that the Republican trifecta can offer is an opportunity to take a look back on regulatory issues that the Biden administration most recently passed. It's called the Congressional Review Act. CRS, the Congressional Review Service, currently estimates that the look back period for clawing back, or the open window, I should say, for clawing back regulations would potentially apply to regulations issued within the last several months, as after August 1st, 2024, though that's not a firm date. Some of these rules can be applied to agency actions that have taken place over the last 60 days of a congressional session. And that allows Congress to say, let's stop this regulation, undo it. We don't agree. And by the way, agency, you can't ever reissue a regulation that looks like this without a legislative action. So the CRA has been used successfully, I would say about 16 times. It is not often used on tax law. And in fact, we think that there are likely more hot topics coming out of other agencies that we expect the Republican majority to look to for major Congressional Review Act action. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so we have taken a look at the key IRA implementation issues, and we've looked at two things. One, are those regulations subject to the Congressional Review Act, meaning could they be legislatively undone? And number two, could an executive order issued by the incoming administration freeze those regulations? Like, are they not final? And so the often incoming administrations, Republican and Democrat, issue a freeze to allow their their incoming administration experts at all the agencies to take a look at regulations before they become final. So let's look at some of the ones that really apply to this community here that we're talking about. One, the prevailing wage and apprenticeships, which I think is probably most pertinent. Those final rules, as we all know, were issued in June. Because it is outside the window for the Congressional Review Act, it cannot be clawed back by Congress, and it is not subject to an executive order freeze. So that is really reassuring. That can be changed by legislation. If the IRA is used as a paid for in full and undone, of course it can go away, but those are things that are really important to keep in mind. There's also, you can look at these others. For example, the low income communities rule that I know are used by a lot of our developers to cite their projects. We believe that it is subject to the CRA. It's also subject to an executive order freeze. So that's one where it might be frozen for some time before the new administration has an opportunity to review it. So that is another potential challenge of another implication for the election for our community. Next slide. We've also taken a look at, and we fully expect, a number of potential executive orders on day one. The incoming administration has made no bones about their desire to implement tariffs. And so that's something that will impact the ability of the industry potentially to continue to grow in the short term. We also expect them to revoke the Biden administration's executive order on tackling the climate crisis. We also expect them to review all grants under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And so that's one that I think is potentially concerning that we're going to be taking a look at. And we've also been watching some of the language around prioritizing AI and cryptocurrency mining. They were big supporters in the last campaign of the incoming administration, and it's possible we'll see some sort of executive order around the importance of having energy demand met for those particular industries. Next slide. So one of the things that we're trying to encourage folks to do is to make sure that every member of Congress understands how valuable the particular slice of these credits are to your communities, to your work, the people you have been able to train and place in jobs over the last several years, and really draw a picture for members of Congress about the value, both economically and in job creation and the way it's changed lives of families with secure, good paying wages. So we have two opportunities for you to engage where we have, if you're a solar or storage company or work adjacent to the industry, you can use that QR code on the screen to put your name on a letter that we're hoping to send to Congress in the next several weeks. We also are really encouraging people to invite members of Congress of both political parties to see them in action. So to visit a training site, to meet with folks that you've put through apprenticeship or workforce development programs, and to really show your work. Because so often these dollars are viewed as just sources of funds, as I said at the top, to pay for other priorities. But in reality, they're changing lives in every community. And it's really important that we make that connection for members of Congress. So those are the two things I'd like to leave you with today. And I know we've got some other great speakers here to further illustrate the importance of how this election is impacting all of you. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm just going to jump on in. Hey, I'm Chris Nichols. I am the Executive Director of Renewables Forward. We are a nonprofit that advocates action for diversity, equity, and inclusion across all the clean energy industries. So I want to assure the folks on this call that you will be getting terrific comments and granular data and amazing resources from my colleagues on the call, Erin at SIA and Megan at National Skills Coalition. But I also will offer some resources for your use and hope between all of us and our wonderful hosts, IREC, and the Alliance, that we can help meet your needs for keeping quality jobs with good wages, family supporting wages, growing across the United States clean energy complex. Next slide, please. I know everything that Erin said is real. And she was amazing at boiling it down into a fairly easy to understand process and approach at the federal level. Pay for, clawback, drawback. You know, these are terms and activities that are very well understood on Capitol Hill and within our federal agencies and federal policy advocates. We do not do advocacy legislatively at Renewables Forward. So I'm going to emphasize other things, but I wanted to point out that it can feel, for those of us in clean energy, and particularly for those of us who are who work every day to grow quality jobs for all of us, easily accessible from all our communities and with folk from every capacity, this election could have felt daunting. And it may in fact be daunting, but I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be all rain clouds. There are silver linings here, and we're going to find them and bring the sun out together. So give me some clicks here, Michelle, if you would, please. I'm just going to go through all the different things that can feel overwhelming, because it can be an overwhelming time. So Erin was very focused on the federal level, all the 45, 48, 40, blah, blah, blah. We didn't even touch on FERC, on how that agency might change transmission laws. Then we go down to the state level, where many things are both different, but also carryover or supported with dollars from the federal congressional appropriations and agencies and laws. How might state regulators, state operating energy companies, and labor laws change to impact what we would like to see for the clean energy economy? How will the different markets change and the different levels of energy buyer, energy user, energy employer impact the folks we would like to see gaining access and career opportunity and career development? And many of our companies, and I'll share this in later slides, operate at an international level, and therefore their headquarters are based in other countries that may not have the same perspective or concern with US-centric systemic situations. And so our desire to give good jobs to under-resourced and underrepresented populations may not be well understood at different international companies' headquarters based in wherever they're based outside the United States. And then particularly, and this is what I think of, I'm going to throw numbers at you. We're all going to throw numbers at you. Estimates, numbers. Each number represents a human being. And you know within your companies and your organizations that jobs are more than a way to earn a living, or more than a way to support a family or support your needs. Jobs represent dignity. They represent purpose. They can bring us out into new perspectives in the world with your colleagues, with your activities. You know your business as well. You are not hiring for a percentage or a category. You are hiring for a very specific person to do very specific tasks. And with Renewables Forward, we are conducting a more granular data look forward for some of our trade association and organizational partners in the coming year to be more helpful in terms of targeting, especially in situations of stress or duress. How can you better target a specific role and specific capacities or skills when you are looking for that next talented person to bring into your organization? What skills do you need? What do they need now? What can you invest in them to acquire? Where do you need to go strategically and effectively? So let's go to the next slide. and I'll continue sharing. So I'm going to tell you numbers. Erin says numbers. Megan will give you numbers. We really don't know. But what I will tell you is that I do not believe there will be any catastrophic change or traumatic difference in the trajectory of clean energy markets in the United States. We simply have too much market strength. And at the federal level, many things will change, but nothing will change as quickly. Now, there is no, I will change everything in a day. Day one will be blah, blah. That's not going to happen. There are checks and balances. There are large constituencies and human needs, even in red states. And specifically in red states, and I'll speak to that in a later slide, that will make some of the gains we've experienced over the last few years, and in fact, over the last several decades through clean energy growth, we'll hold those gains and will continue to grow. So when you're looking for your workforce, you do need training, you do need partnerships, you do need collaboration, and you need to create a culture that will attract those folks who bring talent into your organization and help you keep them. Next slide, please. So this is my main message. Prepare your organization in every way that you can for resilient and flexible response. We know it'll change. I think it'll be more slow than fast, but be prepared. When way back in the day, and this is before some of us were on this planet, there were a set of rules put out for utility rate making with James Bonbright. And Bonbright said the basic utility rate should be created based on reliability, affordability, accessibility, and fair competition. And those have been refined over, in 1961, when those were written, it was all about public utilities providing energy. There was no distributed energy regulation. There's no distributed energy, no solar, no wind, all that. Now we have many sources of energy. And so some of these rules have been revised to reflect a more competitive, full picture of where we get our energy, how we get our energy, what we should pay for our energy. But still, those basic principles hold: fairness, reliability, affordability, accessibility. The growth in our industries, and by that I mean all the clean energy industries, wind, solar, hydropower, battery and other storage techniques. We're looking at green hydrogen growing, biofuels, geothermal, all the traditional renewable and also efficiency, clean energy technologies have grown. The least expensive sources of new generation continue to be wind and solar at many price points across the globe. We will see growth. You need to think about a different way to think about bringing on new talent. Instead of putting out a job description to where, Indeed or LinkedIn or, your personal website, here's a job description, waiting for those hundreds and thousands of applicants to come in. That may not happen. We're in a very competitive marketplace where folks with talent may have already been poached in your industry, particularly those who are at management levels and above. And if you want new workers, the 2 million new workers we project we might need by 2035, you will need, as a company, to invest in partnerships with training organizations, in skill building your existing workforce and new talent coming in, and in programs such as registered apprenticeships, fellowships, investing even at, and this is something Renewables Forward does, investing not just at entry-level talent management, but at mid-level and senior-level talent management, rotational and investment programs, where you can bring in talent from other adjacent industries that may not be doing so well, despite all the energy need out there, and I hear the cyber currency and the EVs and the AI and all the data farm needs, we don't see a lot of growth in coal, for instance. Now, if you've ever worked in the coal industry, you know your skills, if you are an underground miner, may be specific to that, but they also may translate into offshore wind in terms of hauling, supply chain management. All the management skills can be traversed. And so we need to look across industry for this. And I'll speak to that more in a minute. Next slide, please. So this was an estimate provided by the Department of Energy's U.S. Energy and Employment Report based on 2023 data. And the report itself was published in 2024. The link is here, and I have the links lower in the slides. You will receive these slides, so you can click on those links. They will be live, and you can get this. You don't need to take notes. So back in the day, we had solar, wind, gas, coal, nuclear, all these sources of generation, both clean and fossil generation. And they were looking at these to grow phenomenally in 2x, 3x, 10x type categories of growth. And that was the estimate in 2023. There's another estimate that I just saw that just came out today, and I'll put I'll put it in later so you're not distracted. So this was US DOE's estimate of what we had acquired. 8.35 million total energy jobs, 2023. Next slide, please. And we continue to see growth. The slides you see here, the charts you see here are from DNV. They're a global international company, and they've prepared something called Electric Transition Outlook, or Energy Transition Outlook. And again, that'll be a resource down lower in my slides. But they predict, for instance, wind power growing by 9x over, the next mid-century. So that's mid-century, 2050. And solar growing by 13x. And that was starting at a baseline from the 2022 employment level. So by 2050, they expect wind jobs to grow nine times and solar to be 13 times. So we're looking at, currently, we have about 364,000 employees direct in solar. So you can do the math. We're looking at more than about 4 million jobs in solar by 2050 with the trajectories. And this is an international. Now, again, numbers. Where are these jobs? What kind of jobs are these? This is what we need to consider. Next slide, please. Aside from utility jobs and individual company jobs, when we were talking about the cyber, AI, data farms, all the growth that the Republicans are proposing must be, emergency support, that's largely this. These are corporate energy buyers who are growing average growth in their energy demands by 1.3 gigawatts over the last 10 years. And now at are about 84 gigawatts. These are corporate, and they continue to grow. So CEBA, Corporate Energy Buyers Association, puts out a state of the market. It's usually it's available only to member companies, but they provide some summaries like this. But you can imagine what this means for energy employment. We have companies like Microsoft who want to restart 3 Mile Island Unit 2 and take all of that electricity for their own corporate energy needs, their data servers, because of the huge increase in new power demands that we didn't even imagine 20 years ago. And this will continue to grow. Utilities are thrilled. They were suffering from flatline capacity growth for a number of years until electric vehicles started to become available and ubiquitous. And then it was like, woohoo, let's charge up those cars utilities are saying. And now there are even more loads beyond EVs to drive this kind of growth. These are the kinds of jobs we need. But not just growth in energy generation from large central station power plants. It will come from everywhere, which is the purpose of this webinar. Where are those jobs going to be? Next slide, please. Depending on how you model it, we may not have those jobs. Again, this is from a tool called the Energy Policy Simulator. It is free to use. It is available. You can click it in the link there. If everything from Project 2025, the conservative Republican plan of policy action that is being considered by the new incoming administration, if everything in Project 2025 were implemented, we would see actual job loss, and both immediate, annual, and incremental job loss through 2050. In fact, by 2025, or 2030, sorry, we would see 1.7 million jobs lost from that 8.3 million base, and so forth. I encourage you to check on this tool because doomsday is not likely to happen, but there will be stutter steps. And anybody on this call can use that tool, put in your inputs, and see what you think is going to happen. They also have a very useful state-by-state impacts of Project 2025 that's lower down in the resource box. So you can click on your state. I'll try to, my partners in crime might be able to drop the links in from my slides. I can't drop them in while I'm presenting, but I'll come back maybe while Megan's presenting, I can drop those links in. So no worries. And there's a resource slide later with all these links live that you'll receive from the webinar. So play with these things. And I do have one that I would like to drop in that just showed up this morning. I'll drop this in the chat. This is from another group, Climate Power, which calculated federal investments so far, delivering 406,000 new jobs. Let's see. Come on, go. Let me make sure all the comments are going into the chat. Okay. And this particular model that I just put in the chat did not include hydropower. There was no water power included in there. I'm like, what? It's old, but it's the most long-running renewable energy source in the United States. It's water power. Why'd you forget it? Anyway, so you can see, depending on which model, which industries, which locations, US, state, international, you're using, you get lots of numbers. What I'm like to leave with you is that when you're looking for jobs, you must have skills, and you must look specifically at which jobs and locations you're talking about in terms of role and industry. There will always be jobs. There will always be job growth in clean energy, but you have to then look more granularly at what you need to support the folks you want to help find those jobs. Next slide, please. So I just took the three most basic renewable energy sources, most standard, solar, wind, and hydropower, to indicate what kinds of culture, perspective, nuance, broad brush, sorry, hydro, solar, and wind, you might be looking at. And this is taken from the most recent US Energy and Employment report from the Department of Energy in terms of employers reported difficulty in hiring, particularly, and also demographics. So solar is very large numbers, but only 48% of solar direct jobs are in field operations, installing panels, transporting panels, maintaining panels, hooking panels up to the racking or the surface interconnection. 52% of all solar industry is back office. It's administrative management, supply chain, finance, a lot of finance. Moreover, solar has gradually transitioned from a residential rooftop installation predominance into now electric utilities, both public and private, recognize the cost-effective energy generation of solar, and much of solar is moving to a utility scale in terms of installation and generation acquisition. Solar is also very young, relative overall. The 31% of all solar workers are under 30 years old. That's incredible. And still predominantly male, although women are gaining. About 31% of solar workers are female right now. Across all these industry, every employer is going to report that finding qualified workers is the most challenging aspect, with a little bit of nuance between the different industries. The wind industry now these are all in the United States, I'm saying, when they operate in the United States. The wind industry is largely owned by very large international energy conglomerates. Very few, if any, large wind companies are based in the United States. They all have US operations, which can be quite large. Much of the manufacturing for wind is based in the United States when it can be. And you'll see increases in manufacturing, particularly in that report I just stated. There was a lot of manufacturing reporting data that was quite useful. Wind is usually only successful at larger scale. You see some of the offshore wind individual towers now generating as many as 5 megawatts per tower. That's kind of monolithic. I can't even imagine the scale. Huge. They're very, very large. And the stress on the wind industry is that Trump had said in much of his campaign messaging that he hated wind. I don't know if that's actually true, but some of the folks who were giving him money certainly hated wind or whatever. So they're feeling a little stressed. What will the new administration do in terms of wind attacks or wind deregulation, this sort of thing? Wind is the middle age technology of these three. The average age is 30 to 54 in wind. Majority of those workers, they have an above average female and BIPOC worker demographic. Above average for the renewable energy industry, I should say. That doesn't mean they're above 50%. They're just better than most clean energy industries. And construction for wind is what is very difficult in manufacturing. These are specific components, very specific skills to install wind, especially offshore, but increasingly onshore. Hydropower, older. You have the perspective of hydropower is that they are a bunch of old white male engineers. And they are engineers. 83% of all direct jobs in hydropower are engineering jobs. So, but it's not exactly true that they are a majority male. They actually are working their way up to having more women engineers and slightly younger, although they're still pretty old. I mean, average age in hydro is something like 54. So they are definitely recruiting and investing and looking for new talent who are willing to serve in a generally remote, rural, locational headquarters for water power. And so they're actively working on that. Next slide, please. Okay. I don't want to use all my time. I think Megan has tremendous material to share with you as well. So I wanted to leave you with a few suggestions, knowing that the numbers are fluid and will change, and that all industries are going to be very hesitant to take any bold action until the next administration settles and more is known about what might happen in the immediate quarter and first half of 2025. just look at your workforce and make sure that your workers are as skilled as they can be, with skills that are certified and well recognized. In the solar industry, SIA has taken a lead on this. In the wind industry, there are a number of independent companies like Vestas that have excellent training programs and apprenticeship programs. Also, American Clean Power Association, as a trade association, has a standards development based on the Global Wind Organization, quite good for wind technicians. Hydropower has a number of engineering certifications. So make sure your workforce not only is skilled coming in, but that you're prepared to invest in upskilling them. Technically upskilling them. Make sure you have known career pathways for existing employees that are considered fair across demographic, gender, and other characteristics. When you look at what you need, look at role, location, and mobility. This is being very specific. What do I need in this project at this time for this duration? And make sure the technical needs are first, and that your crew or your company or your individual employees have certifications that can move anywhere in the country to benefit your other locations or the individual worker, or both, preferably. Renewables Forward always indicates, supports the development of a community liaison, especially if you have larger assets. You should share your employment needs and your skills needs with community-based organizations, not just training organizations, but community-based organizations who can connect you with talent. That can be a relationship, not just a transaction, so that you invest in communities or counties or even states where you have large projects for the long term. And we'll provide lots of training. In this bullet, we have 69% of jobs don't require a college degree. That's across many industries. Some estimates are 75% of jobs don't require a college degree, but everything requires some skill. So it may not be a 4-year degree in a technical field, but we all need skills, and we need certifiable skills that meet a standard. And then build a workplace that is seen as inclusive and fair and well compensated, so that you can retain all the workers that you work so hard to hire. Keep good people, reward them, build their careers, help them develop, and the loyalty to you will save companies money in terms of turnover. I know when I work with employers, they're all complaining about, oh, I had to go to a headhunter recruiting firm to find the latest batch. And this is beyond the C-suite. This is V-suite, management, directors. They're looking at general program managers going to headhunters for this. Well, you pay quite a bit as a company to have a recruiting firm help you find talent, sometimes the equivalent of a full year's salary for that person. Certainly a good chunk of a full year's salary just to find managers and directors. So retain those folks when you find them by rewarding them, by valuing them, by helping them feel bonded with your organization given purpose. Next slide, please. Very quickly, these are just a few resources that are available free. All these are free. All these provide tools and access for you, and they'll be available after the slides are shared. Next slide, please. My own organization provides a tool suite we call the DEI Pathway Forward, and I encourage everyone on the webinar to check it out. The DEI Pathway Forward provides tools for leadership building, action guides, creating a plan for building a more inclusive and workforce with quality jobs, and a measurement survey at the end. So you can set out a plan and then measure your progress after 9 to 12 months, see where you've gotten, try the next set of actions. There's also two other resources that are well taken in terms of advice for building inclusive cultures. Next slide, please. My contact information is here. I welcome anyone on the call to give me a call or an email, text. Please use the tools. I will slip a few of these resources into the chat when Megan takes over next, so you can access them directly. And I appreciate your time. I wish all of us well, and I wish that we all maintain hope for great jobs, quality jobs, because these may be difficult times, but we cannot give up. And the difficulties will not be broad brush. The clean energy movement and the clean energy transition will continue. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Megan Evans. I'm going to actually share my own slides and control my screen for this. I seem to be suffering from the cold that's going around, so hopefully my voice holds out for this presentation. But in case you don't know the National Skills Coalition, we are working towards a national commitment to inclusive, high-quality skills training so that more people can access a better life and local businesses can see sustained growth. I want to sort of circle back, and hopefully we'll be bridging what Chris shared with you and also what Erin shared with you earlier. Erin mentioned how valuable it is to draw a picture on the value of these investments. Well, NSC recently, in the last year, commissioned a report with Blue Green Alliance from the Political Economy Research Institute, Perry at UMass Amherst, to analyze not just the investments made by the Inflation Reduction Act, though I'll focus on those today, since those are most related to the Clean Energy Workspace, but also the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act and the CHIPS and Science Act, because we wanted to understand how these laws would impact the labor supply and labor demand. So hopefully this will help draw some good examples for you if you haven't seen this research before. So the Inflation Reduction Act is projected to create nearly 850,000 jobs annually and 8.5 million jobs over the length of the bill if the investments are maintained. You can see the other pieces of legislation in this chart that I'm showing right now as well, but the Inflation Reduction Act is where I'll be focusing much of this data on. And with that, the analysis identified 48 occupations that will see increased demand across the duration of these investments. Now, because there's so much overlap in the occupations in infrastructure and clean energy, which I'll talk a little bit more about, the highest growth is expected for construction laborers, first-line supervisors of construction trades and extraction workers, electrical power line installers and repairers, and operating engineers. I can share the report data after I finish speaking so that you can delve into it a little bit more if you so choose. But a lot of these occupations do overlap with one another into the clean energy space. And so as we're seeing these jobs expand and have new jobs created, it also means that we're going to need training and resources for that training as well. So nearly 70% of the jobs created by these investments are going to be available to individuals without bachelor's degrees, but will require some level of post-high school skills training. And that's significantly higher than the 59% of jobs in the current workforce that don't require a degree. And then you also have another set of occupations that have relatively low formal post-secondary requirements, while 27 of the 48 have significant entry requirements, including post-secondary credentials and apprenticeships. So there's a lot of opportunity here, but it is going to require skills training so that folks can enter these jobs. And they're generally good jobs as well. So As I advance the slide, jobs created by the Inflation Reduction Act specifically are projected to pay a median hourly wage of $26.20, which is higher than the median hourly wage of the entire US workforce at $23.70. So that's about a 10.5% bump. And they're also more likely to have health insurance coverage at 53% to 50%. However, the one downside of these jobs, and maybe I shouldn't say one downside, but they are a little bit less likely to offer retirement plans. So sorry, I switched the statistics. So higher chance of having health insurance, but a slightly lower chance of having a retirement plan. So there's some work to do in these career paths, but they're relatively good jobs. The problem, though, is with investments and also let me go back to that. That's just an illustration of the median hourly wage, insurance coverage, and retirement plans for all of these pieces of legislation versus the total U.S. Workforce. And you'll notice I'm trying to run through things in part so that there's time at the end for questions for all of us, because I know you all have been holding your questions to the end. So I might race a little bit. Of these occupations, about 20 are going to face labor shortages, which is going to amount to 1.1 million workers. So without these investments in training and skills, they're going to face a shortage of workers. And this is compounded by the fact that we are also seeing a large number of folks hitting retirement age and leaving these careers. At the same time, a lot of clean energy careers have been largely inaccessible to underrepresented workers, particularly women and people of color, due to a history of inequitable policies and practices. So addressing occupational segregation is key to making sure that everyone has a fair shot at succeeding in the clean energy economy, whereas failure to act would prevent millions of workers from accessing these opportunities. Some of the data that bears out this is that women are critically underrepresented in many of these occupations facing shortages. So in half of these roles, women comprise only 10% of the workforce compared to 47% of the overall workforce. And then workers of color are similarly underrepresented. And I apologize, I have a really bad habit of forgetting what slide I'm on. In 15 of the 20 occupations facing shortages, the percentage of people of color in the workforce is significantly lower than the general market of labor. And so as our demographics shift, recruitment and training efforts are going to need to focus on increasing the participation of women and people of color in these high demand fields in order to meet our energy commitments. Now, we know that some of these investments are threatened by the political landscape. With the new Congress and administration, there's a real possibility that portions of the Inflation Reduction Act could be repealed. Republicans in Congress, and then also President-elect Trump, have indicated some desire to roll back clean energy investments. And I know Erin went over some of this, but I just wanted to illustrate some of the places that we saw this in the last Congress. So HR 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act, that repealed methane emissions, the methane emissions fee under the Methane Emissions Reduction Program. It repealed the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a $27 billion grant fund to help energy projects in low-income areas and communities of color. And then it also included provisions to repeal and rescind unobligated balances from electric home rebate programs, the energy efficient contractor training grants, and then also the grants for state and local governments to adopt efficiency zero building codes. We also saw that in the Limit Save Grow Act, they similarly tried to repeal production tax credits on electricity production, moving it back to the prior law, and then also limiting the number of energy efficient upgrades to commercial buildings and homes, and then also had a piece about the electrical vehicles limitation. So a lot of that to say that they were trying to repeal a lot of the tax credits in the IRA. And that bill passed the House in 2023, as did HR 1. It didn't get further than that, but all that to say is Republicans have already tried to rescind some of these tax incentives for clean energy investments. We also saw this late last Congress with the electrical vehicle, the HR 7980, and Chinese Dominance of Electrical Vehicles in America Act, which was targeting EV credits for, and specifically China's involvement in EV manufacturing components. So that would hurt the EV market if something like that moved forward. And then also we have seen comments from President-elect Trump calling the IRA the biggest tax hike in history. And as Chris mentioned, showing a lot of skepticism towards wind and EV in particular. So that while that doesn't tell us everything, it does show us that there is an appetite to target some of these pieces. Now, there's some, I guess, good news here in that there are challenges to repealing these. So in December, as late as December, the Biden administration indicated that it had already given out $100 billion in clean energy grants, and then that they were on target to obligate 80% of the direct funding from the bill. Obviously, that makes them harder to unwind. That doesn't really do much for the tax credit specifically, but the direct grants, they have already given out a lot of them or made commitments to them. So it makes it more difficult to eliminate them in the future. We also saw congressional Republicans late in August, and 15 of them are returning for the 119th Congress, write to Speaker Johnson urging that they not prematurely repeal energy tax credits. And so that could, with their tight margins that Aaron discussed earlier, it makes the math a little bit harder for them. And so that is a point of potential positive news. The other piece, and I think both Chris and Aaron mentioned this a little bit, is that there is analysis showing that districts that voted for Republicans tend to be the bigger beneficiaries of the Inflation Reduction Act grants and benefits as well. And so there was some WAPO analysis showing that that could be 3 times the benefits as those that lean towards Biden. And then also, if you look at the Department of Energy's Energy Investment Tracker and dig down into some of the data, of the 74 projects that they list that have public funding attached to them, 58 of them are located in states that voted for Trump in the last election. So while it doesn't prevent Congress from taking action, it may make rolling back provisions a little bit more difficult for Republican members of Congress who are seeing those benefits in their districts and in their states. What we know about the plans to repeal portions of the IRA is limited. Recently, there was circulating a list of offset options that House Republicans have put forward that showed that they're looking to target $300 billion from what they refer to as Green New Deal provisions, $112 billion by repealing EV language, and then another $56 billion from green energy grants, as well as much as $500 billion from green energy tax credits. Now, right next to that $500 billion from green energy tax credits was also a notation that if there's the political appetite. So that already shows that they're considering whether this is going to be impacting their own communities if they take this money away. And that's a positive sign for advocates who don't want to see this funding go away. Additionally, and this is really new, congressional leadership has already asked President Trump to hold off on any executive orders rolling back the Biden administration's work on EVs. That is because they want to save that money for reconciliation, but it does potentially provide more time to push back and message the importance of these investments. So while we don't have a lot of details about what's on target specifically, probably one of our first looks, at least for the Trump administration, are their budget, in which we'll probably see in March, the skinny budget. From that, we might have a better sense of what's on tap to target, and what modes specifically might be targeted in terms of energy production. And so what can states and stakeholders do to make sure we're addressing the clean workforce amidst the uncertainty? Well, Erin talked about the ways that you can advocate and oppose those attempts and bringing the stories. I 100% agree, but I think one thing that I wanted to share was thinking about the voices that are going to be important to Congress and the Trump administration. This time around, it's definitely going to be business voices in your networks. Those are the people who are going to be able to make the case for maintaining these investments. They're going to be able to make the case for the job creation and energy diversification and energy independence. Certainly, all advocates are going to be able to make great cases and be able to tell stories. But if we're thinking about who has the most influence right now, I think that's going to be the business voices in your networks. And luckily, many of you have a lot of business voices in your networks who can point to the granular level data on the jobs in districts and in states that are impacted or can be created by these investments. And so I do want to say that even if energy funding is diminished, trying to have a positive note, the reality is you're still going to need investment in your workforce. For instance, clean energy investments were already increasing prior to the enactment of the IRA. Obviously, the IRA accelerated that and created some really meaningful investments that are really taking off. But clean energy is growing regardless. EV and hybrids are already 1 in 6 vehicles on the road. So you're going to need to train workers for those jobs as well, regardless of what happens. And then, as I mentioned earlier, retirements are occurring and accelerating as more and more folks become retirement age. And so you are going to need folks to fill those jobs in addition to the ones that are created. And many of the skills that are required for clean energy technologies are the same as those in infrastructure jobs, which also is seeing investments. And so you're competing with other industries as well, which is going to continue to increase growth. And I'll also allow folks with transferable skills to continue to have flourishing careers, regardless of what happens with these specific investments. What I also want to point to is some stakeholder strategies that folks can use regardless of the outcome. Obviously, uncertainty in the changing federal policies and funding highlights the importance of partnerships, which can help states navigate sort of the ups and downs of the clean energy industry, with not just perhaps the loss of these investments, but other ups and downs like cash flow and supply chains, which we saw with the pandemic, and then also just generally shifts in the global economy. I'm so sorry. Industry and sector partnerships are so critical to this because they can build these employer relationships and then help businesses actively participate in building a skilled workforce. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of examples that we're seeing that sort of illustrate how specific strategies can help you all continue to build a strong workforce. So at Georgia Power, the workforce development program manager that they operate in a industry or sector partnership with related to electrical vehicles. They brought together a local technical college, a nonprofit Goodwill Industries, the consulting firm Accenture, and then also some new EV companies. And they designed and implemented a workforce training program. And what that meant was that they had players filling job openings through trusted pipeline of talent, and then helping education leaders and workers mitigate risks by feeling more confident that they're armed with transferable skills and portable credentials, and that a good job will be available to those going through that training once they finish their training. The other thing that can be done, and I mentioned how a lot of these jobs are not necessarily unique to the energy industry, is that in general, we're seeing the demand across sectors. And so carpenters, electricians, equipment operators, technicians, these are all jobs that probably exist in other sectors or do exist in other sectors. And they just might require an additional module to add on the specific skill sets of a different role in a different sector. And so this can look like HVAC technicians on heat pump installation and maintenance, or training auto repair technicians on EV batteries. We're already seeing some examples of this, taking place in the States. For instance, the Illinois Green Economy Network, they work across 39 Illinois community college districts to support the development of curriculum and infrastructure to prepare students for renewable energy careers. They are approaching prioritizing flexibility so that the individual colleges in that partnership can adapt to the changing needs by adding the green technology modules to existing training programs so that they have those transferable skills. And that's a great model to lift up, because I think it's a good example for what can be done to help build the workforce in the states and with various stakeholders at the state and local level, regardless of the outcomes of what happens with reconciliation and potential rollback of some of those investments. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're driving equity in the clean energy workforce by prioritizing underrepresented populations. From the data I showed earlier in my presentation, we know that workers of color and women are underrepresented in the workforce, in the energy workforce specifically. And that in order to meet the demand that we're going to see and continue to see, we're going to need to bring those folks into the workforce more intentionally. And so states like New York, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, they're serving as a good example of this by using a workforce funding model that prioritizes equity while also connecting with industry partnerships and industry needs. And so there must be a clear collaboration with the industry to ensure that the training initiatives are aligned with what they need and real employment opportunities. But it also prioritizes programs that are going to serve specific populations. Those include low-income communities, those at risk of environmental burdens, communities of color, and then former fossil fuel workers. And then it provides incentives to providers by increasing the reimbursement rate depending on the percentage of trainees who qualify as one of those categories of workers. And so that's going to bring incentive to bringing new and inclusive policies and faces and voices into the energy industry. Because as folks retire, you can't keep the industry the same, even if you wanted to. And I hope that we all don't want the status quo, but you can't even if you wanted to, because our nation is changing. And so in order to maintain and grow, we have to increase diversity in various jobs. And then finally, in order to create success, both on the job and in training, we need to incorporate these holistic supports that are going to help folks succeed. So transportation, childcare, digital skills training, career services, those are the things that are going to help folks succeed in the voices and faces and help people have long-lasting careers in the clean economy. And so all that to say as a recap, while I wish I could confidently say that clean energy investments are secure under the new Congress and administration, it's very uncertain what will happen. However, many of these investments have already been distributed to states, and there may be limited political appetite to undermine projects that are already underway. And so the best we can do is implement some of these policies that are going to create an inclusive workforce for the energy jobs, and also reiterate the importance of these jobs to these communities and show on a granular level how these jobs are growing, how they are impacting individual communities, and the impact to states and districts, so that members of Congress and the administration better understand both the needs of the industry and also the benefits of the industry. With that, I will pause. I know I didn't give a lot of time for questions, but I will stop sharing my screen.
That's okay. Thank all of you for sharing such important information during this time. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but that's perfectly fine because we gave a very robust and informative presentation. So I will address the 3 questions that we do have. Just for you all to know, the webinar and panelists, feel free to come on screen. The webinar and all associated information will be emailed to those who registered for the webinar. So the first question is, the direct pay provision of the IRA enables non-tax paying entities to receive cash for their qualifying tax credits. What are the chances that direct pay, a uncapped liability for Treasury, will not be repealed in its entirety? And any one of you can answer or respond to this question.
So is the question, what are the chances it will not be repealed, or?
Yes, will not.
Okay. So I think obviously there's I don't like to deal in percentages, so I'm just going to kind of give facts and then you can kind of draw your own conclusions. But direct pay has been incredibly important, as you may know, especially for rural co-ops, rural electrical co-ops that have had an opportunity for the first time really to have access to the benefits of investment tax credits in order to diversify the types of energy that they use in their organizations. And so they're a very, very powerful voice on Capitol Hill. But direct pay is, has some vulnerabilities, as you mentioned. So those are the 2 facts that I know. I also know that they're up here working extremely hard to maintain that piece. And I've also heard from many other school districts, fire stations, government agencies, or local governments, et cetera, that have taken advantage of direct pay in order to install solar and storage in their communities. So I think there's a pretty meaningful presence of folks who have taken advantage of that credit. Chris?
I would agree. I think direct pay is on the block because it's such an easy target, but it is also a well used by many sizes and channels, and not just the rural electric co-ops, who I agree, Erin, are incredibly powerful, but all those entities that wanted to acquire solar in particular, but also wind, batteries, conduct efficiency upgrades. The direct pay provisions have been given to so many different entities in red states and blue states, I think it'll be difficult to pull those back. There's going to be a very strong debate on that, and it may not go wholesale. There may be small carve outs as opposed to the whole thing being whacked.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. And the last and final question is, do you agree that the high priority extension of the 2017 Trump tax cut will likely include repeal of the IRA-based and bonus tax credits and the direct pay provision?
Well, I think that's the $1,000,000 question, and that's certainly something that is keeping me and many of the other folks on this call very busy over the last 2 years. We at SEIA started working to preserve the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act probably the week after it was signed into law in August of 2022. So this is a long-standing vulnerability. We know what happens under other reconciliation scenarios. We've seen it happen for a dozen years with the ACA, the healthcare bill. So we knew that the Inflation Reduction Act was vulnerable to that. I think the benefits, much like the ACA, is that these benefits are very widely dispersed, as my colleagues have shared, and are creating jobs all across the country. So our work together is to make sure we make the case to prevent wholesale repeal of the IRA. But I do think that it is vulnerable, and I do think that elements of the IRA are very vulnerable. And so it's important that we all make our voices heard.
Thank you, Erin. Anybody else have anything to add?
I don't know if I can add anything more than what Erin said, other than, we've seen that proposals out, and they're just proposals right now, but that show that these pieces are being targeted. And so we need to take that as a serious threat to these components and work towards messaging their importance, as I mentioned, and know that they are being targeted at this moment.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank all of you for joining. That concludes our first webinar of 2025. Excited to have such a great group for a great conversation. We appreciate your time and attendance. And the next webinar will be held in March, so we'll see you then. Thank you very much.